Chapter 3. Pol Pot, the Butcher of Cambodia. In the humid jungles of Southeast Asia, far from the Cold War superpowers and the eyes of the world, a genocide unfolded that would leave an entire nation traumatized and scarred for generations. At the center of this nightmare was a man known simply as Pol Pot, a former schoolteacher turned revolutionary whose utopian dream quickly spiraled into one of the most brutal genocides of the 20th century. The making of a tyrant. Pol Pot was born Saloth Sar in 1925 in Prexpov, Cambodia. Educated in French colonial schools and later in Paris, he was introduced to Marxist and communist ideology during his time in France. Upon returning to Cambodia, he joined a growing communist movement inspired by Maoist China and Soviet Marxism, but with a distinctly Khmer twist. In the years following Cambodia's independence from France, political instability, civil war, and U.S. bombings during the Vietnam War created the perfect storm for a radical regime to seize power. That moment came on April 17, 1975, when Pol Pot's guerrilla army, the Khmer Rouge, marched into Phnom Penh. What followed was one of the most terrifying experiments in social engineering ever attempted. Year Zero, a utopian hell. Pol Pot envisioned a Cambodia without class, currency, religion, or modernity, a self-sufficient agrarian society based on rural collectivism. To realize this, he declared Year Zero, wiping the slate clean of history, identity, and culture. Cities were emptied. Millions were forced into the countryside for hard labor in collective farms. Doctors, teachers, engineers, anyone with an education, were labeled enemies of the revolution. Even wearing glasses was enough to be sentenced to death as a symbol of intellectualism. Religion was outlawed. Families were torn apart. The Khmer Rouge abolished money, schools, private property, and foreign influences. It was a war on modern civilization itself. The killing fields. Between 1975 and 1979, an estimated 1.7 to 2 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population, died from starvation, forced labor, disease, and mass execution. Execution sites across the country became known as killing fields. Victims were often bludgeoned to death to save bullets. Babies were killed in front of their parents. Torture was rampant in secret prisons, most infamously S21, Tuol Sleng, in Phnom Penh, where over 17,000 people were imprisoned and almost none survived. The Khmer Rouge created a culture of absolute fear. Citizens were told, "To keep you is no benefit, to destroy you is no loss." Informants were everywhere. People were forced to denounce family members. The regime thrived on paranoia. The fall of the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot's paranoid regime eventually turned on itself. Internal purges grew, and relationships with neighboring Vietnam deteriorated. In 1978, after multiple border incursions and mass atrocities against Vietnamese civilians, Vietnam invaded Cambodia. By January 1979, Vietnamese forces overthrew the Khmer Rouge and installed a new government. Pol Pot fled into the jungle, continuing to lead a guerrilla resistance for years, supported covertly by various foreign powers opposed to Vietnam's presence. Despite the scale of his crimes, Pol Pot was never brought to justice. He died in 1998 under house arrest, reportedly of a heart attack, though many suspect suicide or foul play. His death was as shadowy and unrepentant as his life. The legacy of horror. The damage inflicted by Pol Pot's regime is still felt in Cambodia. Entire generations were lost. Cultural institutions were destroyed. Trauma became embedded in the national psyche. Only in the 2000s did a semblance of justice emerge with the establishment of the Khmer Rouge Tribunal, a special court supported by the UN to prosecute the regime's surviving leaders. Even then, justice came slowly decades after the crimes.